Reaching millions of people through her writing and teaching, Lysa Terkeurst is the president of Proverbs 31 Ministries and founder of Compel Training, which has helped hundreds of authors learn to write words that unleash the power of conversation. Lysa has been published in many publications, featured on Fox News, Oprah, and The Today Show, and has been awarded the Champions of Faith Author Award. She is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than 20 books, including It's Not Supposed to Be This Way and Uninvited. Her upcoming release, Forgiving What You Can't Forget, helps people move on, making peace with painful memories and create a life that's beautiful again. Please welcome Lysa Terkeurst to the summit.
Well, I learned yesterday, just like all of you, that I'm supposed to start by saying hello, hello, hello. I've been taking notes, just like you. Well, my session today is on the most surprising hindrance to your innovation. Innovation is no longer just a good idea. It's no longer just a needed skill for you and your employees. Innovation, it's a matter of survival. So what is innovation? Is it a creative idea? Is it an ingenious new method or a strategy that makes people say, wow, why didn't I think of that? I say innovation is the mystery that someone on your team is dying to solve if only you'll make them feel safe enough to do so. Now, I'm no expert on innovation, but I do know a thing or two about making people feel safe and unsafe. When people feel safe, they are so much more likely to take a risk. And when people feel unsafe, they take all that brilliant, educated, pregnant with possibility risk, and they tuck it into a folder labeled maybe one day. And what a tragedy that is for them, for their team, for their leader, a leader who could have access to those absolutely mind-blowing, innovative ideas if only they knew the power of one surprising word. A word that when I say it, some of you will cross your arms, some might furrow their brow. Some might write it down, but not really understand the connection between this word and innovation. But a few of you will lean in and you will be brave enough to say, yes, that word is for me. And in this world where there's so much fear, because there's so much offense and anger and hurt that when it sits too long in the human heart turns into hate. When this one word, when it's uttered, it changes everything. People feel safer. Not only do people feel safer, but their hearts feel braver. And teams that have been so divided by simmering resentments and competition and offense suddenly come together. Then finally, innovation can happen. So, what is this word? The word is forgiveness. Now, most of us don't think about forgiveness as a business tool. I get it. But when it comes to companies, when it comes to leaders, truly wanting to have teams that are willing to take responsible risk, which is required for innovation, forgiveness becomes more important than I think what most of us have ever realized. But it's not just my opinion. Let me show you some articles. Forbes magazine, in an article called Forgiveness as a Business Tool, has a very interesting perspective. Truly transformational leaders are acutely aware of the cost of animosity. The article goes on to say, leaders realize the havoc that can be created by an unforgiving attitude, holding grudges. And I want you to really think about this. Holding grudges is a form of arrested development. It holds people back. People are anxious. There's a lot of paranoia. But what should be remembered is that people who don't make any mistakes don't do anything because they're too busy covering their backs. They're not going to try anything new. Another article that was also in Forbes magazine titled "Forgiveness, the Secret to Innovation" says modern organizations cannot survive without people who yearn to take risk. Knowing that your leader understands the shakiness of new ideas, will forgive unsuccessful but earnest attempts at innovation, that means that you're in an organization that can become risk confident instead of risk averse. The non-forgiving boss is always partially creating an environment that suppresses innovation, while the boss who can accurately and wisely know when to forgive avoids the problem of scaring off innovative employees. And one more from Inc.com, an article entitled "Forgiveness, a Key Tool for Business Success." It was interesting. It rates executive character on the basis of 4 moral principles: integrity, responsibility, compassion, and forgiveness. Think about that. They're ranking these leaders according to forgiveness. And it's tied to the bottom line, because the research goes on to say that organizations that have CEOs with high character ratings in those 4 qualities we just talked about had an average return on assets of 9.35 over a 2-year period, which was 5 times higher than companies with CEOs of low character leadership. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear that, I think forgiveness. Maybe I need to put more thought into it. Forgiveness is not a message that I ever wanted to give. I'll be honest in admitting that right up front, because it is not a message I ever wanted to learn to have to live. But here's the thing about forgiveness. We all need it. And even more, we desperately need to give it. And it's not just so that our teams can feel safer and take more risk and potentially propel our dreams into met goals and missions accomplished. That's part of it, and those are great. But my friend, that's not the real payoff of forgiveness. The real payoff of forgiveness is that you deserve to stop suffering because of what other people have done to you. And your team, they deserve to know that instead of holding grudges, that you, their leader, will hold space for grace. You've been hurt, but you did not let that hurt sit unattended in your heart so long that it turned into hate. Instead, that hurt, which I know you've experienced because I have, all leaders do, that hurt, you turned it into something so beautiful, deeper compassion. You traded your pain for perspective, and you exchanged that wounding for wisdom. And while you are driven and you are determined, because so am I, you are also reasonable and, friend, you are so responsible. You see people, you care about their needs, and you believe in their potential, and you give them a safe place where they can become risk confident, where innovations can emerge, and together, you can both soar. Now, my journey. How did this message of forgiveness find me? Because it did find me, because it came hunting for me. Well, my journey of forgiveness, it's not only made a difference in my ministry and in my business, it's made a difference in my heart, in my humanity. In 2016, life was going pretty amazing. The ministry that I run, Proverbs 31 Ministries, it was doing better than I could have ever imagined. I mean, my biggest dream is that one day I would actually have a secretary or an assistant and a copy machine. Now, I don't know why a copy machine to me seemed like the ultimate startup success when you could afford a copy machine and an assistant, but that's what I thought. And we had excelled way past that. We had so many met goals. We were reaching people all around the world. My books and my Bible studies, they were going into places that I never dreamed, reaching not just hundreds of people like I'd once set a goal to just reach hundreds. No, now they were reaching millions. Also in 2016, it was going to be a big year because 3 of my 5 kids were getting married. Now I'm going to let that sit on you for just a second. In 1 year, 3 of my 5 kids were getting married. Okay. So 2016, wow, I thought it was going to be amazing. But it was interesting when I sat down in January of that year in my prayer chair and I started praying. I actually did 21 days of prayer and fasting. And I asked the Lord to prepare my heart. You know, that's part of the reason why we need to get into God's word and let God's word get into us. It's not just so we can do the good Christian checklist, like be nice and listen to Christian music, don't cuss, and all that stuff. No, we spend time with God and we get into his word and we let his word get into us because he sees what's coming. And he loves us so much that he wants to prepare us both for the good and the not so good and all in between. So as I sat and prayed and spent time with the Lord, I remember I wrote in my prayer journal some very distinct words that I felt like God was speaking to me. Lysa, trust my timing and love your husband. And I remember I kind of flippantly said, yes, God, I absolutely do trust your timing, and I really do love my husband. So yes, and yes. I had no idea that about 2 weeks later, I would find out that my husband, my best friend, the one that I had done the majority of my adult life with, I found out that Art was being unfaithful. And I have to say, it didn't just break my heart. It shattered my world. And I remember thinking, I don't know how to survive this. I know how to run a company. And I know how to meet goals. But I don't know how to survive this. So I knew I needed some help to process, and I found an amazing Christian counselor. The day that I drove up to the counselor's office to have a session. It was going to be a long session because I'd been having weekly sessions, and then all of a sudden he said, Lysa, I think we need to do an intensive. And based on how I looked at the time, he was absolutely right. When I drove up to his office, I had a few distinct thoughts, like, I don't remember when was the last time I actually washed my hair. Now, for those of you with uncomplicated hair, this will mean nothing to you. But for those of you, when you know, you know. Dry shampoo is God's greatest gift. The problem is it allows you to lie to yourself about the real condition of your hygiene. So as I drove up to his office and I parked in the parking lot, I glanced at myself in the rearview mirror and I thought, I really don't know how long it's been since the last time I washed my hair. I can't even remember when was the last time I actually brushed my hair. So I took my fingers and pulled my hair up in a messy bun, which is also God's gift to women with complicated hair. You're welcome. Then I walked into his office, but I had this other thought as I was walking in. I don't know if I put on deodorant. Now, I could deal with him judging my hair, but I refused to sink to the level where I thought I might stink. But I'm a very resourceful person, so I walked into his bathroom, opened up the cabinet, and found some peach air freshener. And I thought, this will do. So I sat down in the counseling office that day, smelling like a freshly baked peach cobbler. And the counselor looked at me and he said, Lysa, do you want to heal? And I looked back at him and I said, yes. I absolutely do want to heal. And he said, well, then today's a great day to work on forgiveness. And I remember looking back at him and thinking to myself, are you high? Like, if you said that today's a good day for me to work on my personal hygiene, I would agree with you. But forgiveness? Forgiveness? There's no way. I mean, I don't know how this story's going to turn out. I don't think I'm finished hurting yet. I don't even know if Art's sorry for what he did. I can't even have a conversation with him at this point, and I think there's a lot of lessons he needs to learn. So how in the world could forgiveness be something that I am ready to work on? I mean, forgiveness is something you work on much later. After you see that the person who hurt you, that they've either learned all the lessons that you absolutely think that they should learn, or after they absolutely, with tears running down their face, come back to you and say they're sorry, and you have some sort of evidence that they've suffered as much as you've suffered. Forgiveness, it's much too early for that. And isn't it kind of crazy how forgiveness works that way? It's like most of us think when we're hurt, it's way too early for forgiveness until one day we think it's too late for forgiveness. And there never seems to be that perfect day where everything is as it should be. And then forgiveness is so obvious that today's the day. It just doesn't work that way. And I can tell you, part of my big problem with forgiveness is that what I learned as a child, it just didn't translate and work out the same way in my very adult life. You see, when I was a child, this is usually what would happen for me and my sister to get a forgiveness lesson. I was the older one, and I was usually the aggressive one, and so I would hit my sister or do something terrible to her. And then she would scream or cry, you know, like little sisters do. And the great judge would appear, my mom. And my mom would come in and she would say, what happened? My sister would say how she was hurt. My mom would look at me. She would determine, Lysa, you are the wrong one, and you need to say you're sorry. And so very sincerely, I would say, sorry. Then my mom would look at my sister, and she would say, now you need to say you forgive your sister. And she would say, I forgive. And then my mom would instruct the two of us to hug and make up. And then she would say something like, and if the two of you don't get your mess together, I'm really going to give you something to cry about. And then she would send us on our way. That was a good childhood lesson on forgiveness. Except as I grew up and walked into some very adult situations, I still carried with me a very childlike view of forgiveness. And I kept waiting for the judge to appear and determine you're right and they're wrong. I kept thinking that forgiveness required reconciliation. And that's not always possible, nor is it safe. You see, the Bible tells us that forgiveness is an absolute command by God. But reconciliation, it's quite conditional. And so I took that childlike view of forgiveness and tried to apply it into very adult situations. And I became so resistant to the notion of forgiveness. I didn't even think it was possible until my counselor helped me understand, Lysa, forgiveness is a decision and it's a process. You see, forgiveness, it isn't giving permission to the other person to continue to hurt you. Forgiveness actually isn't even for the other person. Forgiveness is the only way for you to sever the suffering. And when you've been hurt so deeply, there's been enough suffering, don't you think? And if you've been waiting for that other person to change their behavior or come back and say they're epically sorry or even to admit that what they did was so very wrong, if you're waiting for that and you're waiting for them to make that kind of decision, you are tying your healing to a decision that other person may never make. That's why my counselor said, Lysa, do you want to heal? And when I said yes, he said, then today's a great day to start working on forgiveness. You see, forgiveness is my decision. It's my decision that I can make, and it's not tied to another person. So I said to my counselor, okay, but I don't know how to do this because I'm a very authentic person and I don't really feel like forgiving right now. My counselor said, okay, then let's don't actually start with the forgiveness. Why don't we just start with your pain? And so my counselor handed me a stack of 3x5 cards. And he said, Lysa, I want you to just write out each way that you have been hurt or wronged or traumatized or caused pain. I want you to write it all out. Just get it all out. And I thought, that I can do. So he handed me a big stack of 3x5 cards, and I just started writing one thing on each card. I was hurt in this way by this situation. I was wronged in this way. I was crushed in this way. I was shattered in this way. And I started lining those cards up on the floor, and they snaked all around the counselor's office. And when I finally got all of the pain expressed and out of me, I stood back and I looked at those cards. And it felt so empowering because my counselor stood there and gave witness to the pain that I had been in. And there's something so powerful about another person just saying, I see what happened to you. I believe you. It was wrong what happened to you. And as I stood there, I felt so much lighter just having written it all out. Then my counselor said, okay, Lysa, now I want you to go card by card by card, and I want you to say, I forgive Art for this. And I said, okay, I want to do this. I'm totally a rule follower, so I'm going to do this, but I have to say my feelings have not yet caught up, and so I'm having some anxiety right now because, honestly, I don't really want to do this. And my counselor said, that's okay, Lysa. It's often your feelings that will be the very last thing to sign on to forgiveness. So why don't you just say this? I forgive Art for this, and whatever my feelings will not yet allow for, the blood of Jesus will surely cover. And he handed me a stack of pieces of red felt, and he said, just have a marked moment. And every card, once you say that, just put down a piece of that red felt and just go card by card by card. And I suddenly started to realize this is possible, not because I'm gritting my teeth and bossing my feelings around or even denying the pain and hurt that I have suffered. That's not forgiveness. What forgiveness actually is that God's forgiveness has flowed to me. Now I just must cooperate with his forgiveness and let it flow through me. Forgiveness is not made possible because of my determination. Forgiveness is made possible by my cooperation with what Jesus has already done. So that's what I did. Card by card by card. I forgive for this. And whatever my feelings will not yet allow for, the blood of Jesus will surely cover. I got to the very last card, and I turned around, and I no longer could see all of that pain. I saw pieces of red felt covering all of that hurt, all of that pain. And I had a marked moment where I severed the suffering. I truly believe we deserve to stop suffering because of what other people have done to us. And isn't it interesting that when the Lord taught us to pray, in Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 9, it says this, "This is then how you should pray," Jesus says, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one." I have to say, I never would have written the prayer that way. But isn't it brilliant that Jesus knows the human heart was not created to carry the weight of unforgiveness? When God's forgiveness flows to us and we refuse to let it then flow through us, that heavy weight of unforgiveness is the weight of anxiety and fear and chaos And isn't it beautiful that Jesus knew part of our everyday prayer needs to be confession? Forgive me, Lord, for what I have done. Letting God's forgiveness flow to us, and then forgiveness as we let it flow through us and as we forgive those who have created debts with us. Confession, it quiets the chaos in me. Forgiveness, it quiets the chaos between us. Forgiveness, it is supposed to be as much a part of our everyday life as eating and sleeping and praying and believing. And when we get up in the morning, we can actually choose to forgive and walk in forgiveness that day before we've ever even started interacting with people. And wouldn't that create so much more safety for our teams? And wouldn't it create so much more peace and joy in our own hearts? At Proverbs 31 Ministries, I'm so grateful that years ago, before I knew how much I would need it, we created some family values for our leadership and our team that pave the way to creating an organization that is risk confident and not risk averse. So let me give you a couple of those. One of our family values is getting off the blank page is worthy work. You know, I think a lot of people would phrase it this way: no idea is a dumb idea. But the minute you say that there are dumb ideas, people are afraid that they're going to be the one that actually throws out the ultimate dumb idea. But instead of wording it that way, we worded it, getting off the blank page is worthy work. In other words, every idea is worthy work. You're safe to be innovative here. Another family value we have is we give grace because we desperately need it. And a third one is this is a safe place for imperfect progress. Now, I've told you what a difference forgiveness has made in my life. I wish we had so much more time. I would tell you the rest of the story about how, though we were separated 2.5 years, Art eventually came home. And it was amazing. And I realized God is an amazing God. Sometimes he rescues us out of relationships, and sometimes he restores us in relationships. But regardless, forgiveness paves the road for redemption no matter how our story goes. And I have to say, I love Art. He's an amazing man. He's an incredible, compassionate, transformed human being. And everything I ever learned about leadership, I learned from him. So I can't take credit for so much of the leadership principles that have built my organization. But I want to tell you, as we wrap up our time together, a quick story about a girl named Melissa who brought one of the best innovative ideas ever to our organization. Melissa, she was our receptionist, and she came to me one day and said, I have an idea. Now, we do these things at Proverbs 31 called Dream and Determine, where we want to hear from everybody and give them an opportunity to dream on behalf of our organization. So Melissa came to me and said, I want to start an online Bible study. Now, this was in 2000, at the end of 2010, beginning of 2011. No one was doing online Bible study. I said, okay, Melissa, you want to do an online Bible study. How's this going to work? Because I know what people like about Bible study. Fellowship and food, you cannot provide that through the computer. She said, oh, just trust me. It's going to be amazing. So She decided to start this online Bible study. Her goal, she said, was 50 people. I said, no, Melissa, make it 100 people and I'll let you do it. Melissa did not have 100 people that signed up for her online Bible study. She wound up having 2,500 people that signed up for that first online Bible study. And just last year, she ran another online Bible study. She's been doing, I think they've probably done 25 over the years. That online Bible study last year, featuring my book, It's Not Supposed to Be This Way, had 126,000 people participating. Needless to say, Melissa is no longer the receptionist. She, my friend, is one of our senior executives. Innovation is not just needed and necessary. It is crucial to your survival, and it will not happen without forgiveness. The best time to forgive is before we're ever offended. The next best time is right now. I want to give you an opportunity to have a marked moment of forgiveness. And in a minute, you'll have an opportunity to do that. But I've written this leadership forgiveness declaration that I want you to have. So let me declare this over you today. Making the decision to forgive is so powerful. This is forgiveness. It's deciding that the ones who hurt you, they no longer get to limit you, label you, or lure you into becoming hard-hearted. Their offense, it must not define you or confine you by the smallness of bitterness. The sum total of your one incredible life, it must not be reduced to the limitations of living hurt. Leadership means people love you until they don't. But if they betray you and leave you and take from you, don't willingly hand over your integrity as well. Do not waste your energy on simmering resentments, and don't prove them right by now acting wrong. Remember, their exit may have just given you the very things needed to usher you and your team to your greatest idea. Innovation, it requires necessity and resistance. So, that one that hurt you, forgive them. And maybe even thank them and wish them well. They did not stop you. They propelled you. Throw your arms up in victory and declare, I'm free to forgive so that I can live and discover and create and innovate. Now, get a bit carried away dancing to that song. You know the one that you can't possibly stay down when its rhythm gets turned all the way up. And if it's not a praise song, that's okay. Sing it to Jesus anyway. Dance and sing. It's time to get moving and on with living. This, my friend, is the beauty of forgiving. Indeed, You deserve to stop suffering because of what someone else has done. Today, right now, it's time for you to sever your suffering by making a choice to forgive. And I imagine as I was talking, someone came to mind, maybe several someones. So why not now? Now, have that marked moment. It's your choice. You have the right to make this decision. And it's not based on whether or not they ever said that they were sorry or whether or not they even acknowledged that what they did to you was wrong or that they even have changed in the slightest, because the difference is you've changed. You and your decision to forgive, it's not tied to them, and neither is your healing. There's been enough hurt and there's been enough pain. So let's start there. Take out a piece of paper or a card, and I want you to write down just a few words like I did. Write down a few words or even a few sentences of what happened, because your pain matters. Get it out, write it down, and make sure that you include whatever it is that you need to state. Because what happened, it mattered. And friend, it matters so much that if no one else in this world has ever dared to bear witness to your pain, I will. I believe it. I believe you were hurt. I believe what they did to you was wrong. And if no one else has ever said that they're sorry, I will. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened. Now I want you to be brave and courageous. And I want you to be set free from all of that hurt and pain. So now on the card, write, I forgive this person for all this pain that they caused me, and whatever my feelings will not yet allow for, the blood of Jesus will surely cover. This is your marked moment. You have forgiven and no one can take it away from you. Now fold your card, symbolizing that we have now closed that chapter, because there are so many new chapters waiting to be written. There's beauty inside of you and creativity and the greatest innovation that you have ever known. I declare this over your life, and I cannot wait to see you flourish. Now, let's be inspired by the story of one man who did this very thing. Take a look.